Lord Jesus, we are held together by two things. One, we have found, discovered, and are walking with you. There is no one else we want to find or be found by. And the second thing, Lord, is that we would love the opportunity and the door openings and the possibilities to share you with other people. And now we open the doors of our fellowship to you. And we ask you to fill everything about this moment, to speak to our minds and to our hearts about this amazing ministry of evangelism. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So just to remind everybody, what we sort of usually do is mute ourselves, and then if we want to make a comment, we just sort of wave, and then I'll say yes, over to you, and then you can unmute and talk. Is that okay? So do you want to all just mute yourselves? Because I just want, for the first 2 minutes, I just want to say to everyone.
I'll do it.
Well, you've got plenty of time to practice, Luke.
There should be
You've got it. You've got it.
Yeah,
that's it.
There you go.
Well done.
Can I just ask Richard? I've put it on recording, Richard. Should I have done it to the computer or to the cloud?
It doesn't matter, to be fair. You can do it either. So if it's your computer, after the meeting's ended, it'll just save it straight to like your documents or somewhere on your desktop. If it's the cloud, it's like onto your Zoom profile.
Right.
So, yeah, you'll be able to get it either way.
Right, brilliant. Thank you.
Could I just say, I had a phone call today from the Archbishop of Canterbury. He wants this recording and he wants to send it out to the whole of the Church of England. So can we make sure we get it right? I just very briefly, I just thought it would be good to share how you all feel about this news, not just of lockdown 2. I think we all knew that was coming, but I was very surprised and really, I don't know, maybe discouraged or just sort of walloped by the news I discovered on Sunday morning that we had to close our churches down again. Just wondered how are people coping with that? Sea of indifference. Well, oh no, Jane.
I was just sad. I think there's just lots of sadness. There was lots of that on Sunday morning as we met. Yeah, just it's just sad. I think, you know, people have kind of got back used to it all and everything, and you know, even in the strange format that it is, and it's certainly down at St. John's, we felt like we really started to get some momentum. We were really increasing numbers, seeing some real depth of not just kind of people coming, but some real kind of depth of discipleship and things, some real good teaching going on, and yeah, it's just hit the brakes again. So yeah, it's just sad.
It is. Thanks for sharing that. It's just that sometimes as Christians we feel obliged to, you know, everything's fantastic, you know, whoa, and often it isn't. You know, yeah. How'd anybody else feel about all that? Pete?
Initially, I was quite gutted, but following sort of the initial disappointment, actually, I've had a few dreams recently, and I'm praying on whether they're from God or not, but dreams of underground churches springing up in the midst of this next lockdown. So I'm kind of gutted in a way and holding that lament, but also excited to see what God is going to be doing through it, because he's bigger than the lockdown.
Well done, Pete. And it's good to see that your theological education, which is now begun, is really bearing fruit. So you can tell we're suddenly using words like lament and all sorts of exciting words. Anyway, here's a little story. Because I'm rather like Jane, where I am. Oh, sorry, Claire, were you wanting to say something? All right, it's just the excitement of your back design. I was rather discouraged because I've been at this church for 4 weeks, and there's just a feeling we were really beginning to motor, and new people who've not were beginning to come. Each week we've had 1 or 2 new ones. We've had about 4 new people altogether. So you just think, wow, this is really, anyway. And so I felt, yeah. But last week, I am, there's a certain person in the church, and Maureen kept saying, because she used to go to this church at Carbley, you've got to see. So I invited this woman down, Claire, and we can have a cup of coffee in church, and we sit in the churchyard and a chat. And she told me this amazing story. She became a Christian about 18 months ago on a start course. She'd clearly been bubbling up a bit before then. And this was run by the then vicar and Maureen. They did this start course. And Claire told me how it all just fell into place. And she then did another course after that. And then she said to the vicar, will you organise another start course? Because I've got 5 of my friends that want to come on it. So so this woman is just spontaneously evangelizing. She's a brand new Christian, no church background at all. So I said to her after a while, Claire, what do you think about evangelism? She says, what's that? She's no idea what it is, but she's doing it. And I've often found that that's often where evangelists begin. Nobody tell them to do it, and they don't realize that this is at all odd. They just, and she says, it's just like showing me up. When I became a Christian, it was just like showing me holiday photos to people. I so wanted to just, so it is amazing just how things happen all the time and all around us. And I'm sure many of you got started like that. And it was such a great encouragement and an inspiration to me as I start working that church. Anyway, talking about evangelism, what we're going to do now is Dawn's going to talk to us specifically with a youth focus on. She's one of our diocesan youth advisors. And then Derek is going to talk about it from a sort of a parish based. If you remember last time, we had quite a bit of input from what you might call itinerant wandering evangelists, who were great, but we really wanted to ground it in the local community or whatever. So which of you, and then they're going to talk, and then we'll all be able to ask questions and make comments. Which would like to go first? Would you like to go first, Dawn?
Yeah, I need to show slides though. I can't do it at the moment.
You see, people have been egged on by Neil. Started this off at the last gathering, and I can see we're going from thing to thing now, aren't we? Really, we're going to have drama and puppets and all sorts in future.
Dawn, I'm going to make you host.
Oh, thank you.
Then you can do it.
Awesome.
Okay?
Hang on a minute.
So can you put it back to me when
I
you
can.
finish? Thank you.
I can indeed.
You might have to let people in because there might be 1 or 2 folks coming late.
Sure, that's okay. Right, hopefully you'll be able to see this in a second. Okay, so I've gone a little bit on a tangent. Okay, so if you can't see this, you just need to like minimize on your right hand side. You can minimize the box of people so you can see the full screen. So this is a question that we're being asked a lot actually within our team. Is we've got churches coming back now. Oh, here comes Rolf. And they're saying, actually, do you know what? Our churches have reopened, but our families, children and young people aren't coming back. So I want to kind of delve into ways to engage with young people mid-COVID, in this mid-COVID season. Okay, I've been doing a lot of work with the Anglican Communion at the moment as well, looking at how to engage families in worship. Oh, there we go. I didn't think it was going on then. Okay, so this has been dubbed, young people have been dubbed Generation COVID, which is actually quite a not so good term really. This generation has actually been affected most out of all the generations, and actually been the lost generation really. It's affected their friendships, their well-being, their education, ultimately their faith development as well, cancellation of exams and uncertainty of the job market, and actually they'll be the ones that are paying for the pandemic for years and years and years to come. So although we've kind of got this overarching story of Generation COVID, actually we really can't lose the individual stories. It's really important to delve into that. Young people already know that life is really random and unpredictable, and they live with their own disappointments, hopes and dreams, but really kind of gather alongside a young person and find out what's happening. So I want to just talk a little bit, only a tiny bit, about faith development. This is really quite relevant. So there's a guy called Westerhoff. You probably all know who he is and what he does. And this is how any person will kind of develop their own faith. But I want to particularly talk about the searching faith, which is where a lot of our young people are. They get to an age when they suddenly go, what's this religion thing? Who's this God to me? All that kind of thing. And they start really doing something called performative faith, which is just here. I'll just give you a minute just to read that. So performative faith is all about being allowed to live out our faith through actions. It's acknowledging that our actions not only reflect an interior reality, but actually create new realities. So for example, I might be really struggling to believe who God is, but if I sang worship songs about God's reality and goodness, my belief in God might strengthen. And it's this performative faith, this allowing young people to kind of live out their own faith through actions that we're missing at the moment. So many young people will have lost the ability to be able to allow young people to be able to participate in practicing their faith. It's all online at the moment, isn't it? We keep hearing time and time again that, oh, Luke's gone out, we just admit him, that online is, young people are struggling with online at the moment. I've been reading this week, been reading about an amazing report done by some fantastic people. This is Youthscape. They did some research at the end of 2019 about youth ministry and what's happening at the moment. I'm going to show you a little bit of this report because actually they updated it mid-COVID as well to give you some more up-to-date stats as well. There were three main implications for the research they did. They said that we need to, us as in the church, need to broaden our practice. We need to practice what we preach, and we need to bring practice into the heart of mission. Okay, this looks a lot of words. I can email this out to you later, don't worry. So basically they wanted to touch on spiritual practices. So they tried to put together a list of spiritual practices. This is not a complete list at all. In fact, they actually missed out confession. Obviously, they didn't confess a lot. But they kind of asked youth workers up and down the country, what kind of spiritual practices are you intentionally practicing yourself? We as a diocese have actually took on the rhythm of life. We've recognised that monastic practices work to help develop faith. So these are some of the things that we will do on our own intentionally, and some of the things that we will also teach our young people to do as well. Actually tonight, the rest of our team is actually rolling out the Rhythm of Life Advent resources with education in another Zoom room somewhere across the stratosphere. So I won't read through all of these with you, but these will change as COVID comes along as well. Okay, so they've done a couple of lists just here about what do we teach our young people? Do we teach more than we experience, or do we experience more than we teach? So I always give the example of a child being a marble jar, and just in a complete empty jar, and we end up filling the child full of different bits of knowledge. You must know how to read the Bible, you must know how to pray, you must know how to. What we don't do is we don't open the marble jar and allow them to play and allow them to experience. So you'll see there that there are a lot of things that we teach, so like fasting, but actually We don't allow them to experience a lot of that. Lament, Robin, is on the list. We teach more about lament than we allow young people to experience lament. And then they did this really interesting thing about what is attractive to young people, what is faithful to Jesus serving, and what forms our Christian identity. So these are all the different kind of spiritual practices. And you'll see that right in the center of those is serving others. And actually, Jesus served others. There's lots of things that we do, like pay it forward, random act of kindness, pure social action stuff, the stuff that young people absolutely adore doing. It's the stuff that really kind of helps you put your faith into action just there. Okay, so now I'm going to go mid-COVID now. So pre-COVID, on the left-hand side, these are things that youth workers were regularly doing. So worshipping and singing, we can't do that at the moment. Serving, all the way the top 5, and then it just kind of shifts about what are you practicing now. So attending an online church, prayer and meditation. So COVID has really changed the way that we do our spiritual practices. So much so that rest and lament and living simply have massively increased over the time as well. So whereas 19% of people were lamenting before, we've now got 38%. It's become a real important practice during this season. Okay, so now I just kind of want to land it into what's happening across the diocese at the moment. So finding new rhythms and routines. So how can we create new rhythms and routines and Christian practices to ensure that young people experience God, to ensure that they're really getting that performative faith, really living out their own faith and trying it out for themselves. Celebration is one of the most important things to do. So how do we celebrate? How do we learn to do that? Do we do it through online? Are we doing drop-off doorstep packages? What are we doing to help people celebrate? But also, how are we helping people lament? Are we literally saying to them, it's okay, it'll all be okay tomorrow? Or are we getting alongside them? Are we sitting with them? Are we saying, let's walk this with you? Are we allowing that lament in the season there? Hospitality, really, really important. So these things I'm bringing up, we're in the 3 circles. So these are the main parts just there. So the friendly and generous reception and entertainment of guests, visitors, or strangers. It's really hard to do at the moment in this season, hospitality, but there's lots of ways that we can still continue by definitely doing doorstep ministry. Some of the best things I've heard people do are dropping off care packages, making sure that people have things to do offline so they can still connect. One-to-one mentoring can still go on, along with the new government guidelines that came in, that can still go ahead as well, which is great. Creativity, be really, really creative with what you're doing, especially if you're just doing online stuff. Catherine Alice is doing something called Craftism, which is amazing. She's doing a year-long Craftism project. She says it will involve lots of different small activities and some bigger group projects as well. And at the moment, they're learning how to knit and crochet scarves so they can tie them on lampposts so that homeless people can use them over the winter. So that's one way to really kind of be creative. Pam is running Shine along with Urban Saints. They're not just doing online stuff, but they're actually physically giving out resources. I don't even know what's in it, Pam. I can't even see on my screen, but I'm guessing there's face masks and you know, kind of things that people can kinesthetically connect to online stuff as well. Physical packs to give out. We've got Messy Church. People are delivering Messy Church packs. Christingle is happening as well. Christingle is still happening, which is all brilliant. Challenging injustice. So I've kind of put food banks and free school meals because a lot of people are really passionate about this at the moment. And how can we help young people really engage in injustices in the world at the moment? There was a big thing where young people particularly went to leave paper plates outside of MPs' names with the names of children that they knew in their community that needed free school meals. How can we help young people engage in that injustice, that challenging injustice just there? So they're just some little ideas that I had for you. Hopefully I didn't go too over time. Are there any questions?
That was amazing, Dawn. Wow, what a presentation. Could I ask a question? If you've got, you know, 2 or 3 teenagers or 4 or 5 children in your church, are we allowed to say to them, look, we can't meet indoors, but we can all go for a walk in the park? Is that not allowed?
Not at the moment, not until after lockdown. So at the moment, the government has agreed that we can do kind of emergency youth work. So those that are really vulnerable, and then they've not defined vulnerable. So it would be people, we're allowed to define vulnerable locally. Have the book on. But in normal time, yes, you can have up to 15 people in a bubble and do indoor and outdoor work. Absolutely, definitely.
Well, I think all our young people are vulnerable.
Yeah, that was the argument today. But they also said, I'm pointing at you now, they also said, just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should do it. So you need to obviously think about the vulnerability of the people that you're working with, and make sure it's really, really safe. But there are loads of ways. They were saying that doorstep deliveries are one of the most important ways that we can connect with people and families at the moment, particularly. Definitely. I did say to Naya, do you want to come to this church and do this thing? And she was like, no, it's online. I don't like seeing myself online. So as much as we can do offline is so good. But young people are the same as we are, desperate for connection.
So could I ask, we've just ordered a load of, you know, the Church of England has brought these Advent booklets out. What are they called? Comfort and Joy?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is, if you've got some teenagers, stick one of them in a couple of bags of Smarties and a Christmas cracker in a bag, and just go knock on their doors on Advent Sunday and give it to them and have a little 5-minute chat.
Yeah, perfect. There are lots of churches that are doing Christingle in a bag. So there's one of the parishes that I know that are actually delivering a Christingle pack per household and per child, and then they're going to live stream how like a Christingle service, so that they can actually take part. So they've got that kinesthetic kind of thing going on as well. Pam will be able to tell you about Shine as well, what's happening with Shine and the pack being delivered.
If that's up, Friday the 4th to Sunday the 6th, there's just it typically happens as a physical gathering for the last 12 years for girls aged 11 to 18, and it's just got just an hour on the Friday night, an hour on the Saturday morning, an hour on the Saturday night, with a load of like offline activities like come bake with me, come dance with me, like all these different types of activities for the girls to do, and then a little bit of a Sunday afternoon so it doesn't affect Sunday morning church, and it's completely free to sign up. Anna's already got her girls all sorted, so that's great. The goodie box will be, like Dawn said, kinesthetic, so it's a well-being box really. So there's going to be like a little teddy, some chocolates, a face mask, positive affirmations, and things that just all link to the theme of trust. So our whole message through the weekend is take your place, you know, still feel walking in confidence that even though it doesn't feel like you can trust, God is trustworthy and that he is holding it all together. So it's kind of building that, but it's also delivered in a way that it's available to people that are just checking God out. So it's evangelistic in its reach also. So we try to do some pre-gathering fun, 15 minutes of worship, which is a mixture of worship and spoken word, and then keynote speaking from the same couple throughout the weekend, so that it builds a positive rapport. And then there's like a group Zoom afterwards, so there's actual time for even request a prayer.
So this is for girls 11 to 18.
Yes, and you can just sign up completely for free, but if you want your goodie box, you've got to sign up before the 16th November.
Wow. And
awesome.
where do we sign up? Do we just go on to Shine on the internet?
So just go to urbansaints.org/shine, and you just
Very
get the parent to fill in the details. And if you, as the youth worker, youth volunteer, want to be on board, you just fill in the group leaders one, which just means that we can just do safer recruitment and just make sure that everything's covered, which it will totally be, but we just want to be able to be safeguarding in everything we do.
And if you're a small church, it's such a fantastic thing to do. So I'm presuming Anna will go along with her young people, so that you're still building that connection with your own young people, but you're totally relying on a huger organization to be able to put that on for you. Because I'm guessing, Anna, that you wouldn't be able to do something like that on your own, not without lots of work and lots of money. So it's just trying to connect the dots, but all the time just keep building relationship with the people that you've got, the young people that you've got in the smallest, what you might think is a really small way, but to them it's huge, just massive.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that even if lockdown was extended and the girls had to do it on their own at home, it's still so engaging that even if you're just one singular young person, you can still feel connected and feel like you're not alone. And then be able to have conversations and natters over the social media platforms and things like that, or access to parents' social media if they're under the age of 13.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds great for onlining, but just supposing we do come out of lockdown beginning of December, and a typical church has maybe got a handful of children or of 2 or 3 teenagers, which is what I always plug into. Do you think it would be possible to just sort of gather them somewhere, maybe in the church, and just have a little Advent night together?
Yeah, because with like Dawn was saying, you can, if when we come out of lockdown it goes back to how it's currently been, you're allowed to have 15 young people, not including leaders, in that room in a physically distanced way. So if I think that Shine or any Advent activity could happen, so we could gather those young people on the Friday night for 7 till 8 o'clock in church, and then watch a movie all together afterwards. And we've got popcorn and hot chocolate in those boxes as well. So if we go back out of national lockdown and we're allowed to do the 15, this would so work perfectly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, Richard.
Well, a question to Dawn, but for anyone else, I just wondered, has anyone during COVID had any just positive experience of doing online stuff with young people? Like, have you been able to have a young people small group? Has anyone been able to just do anything a bit different that's been online as a way of connecting with their young people and discipling them? I just wondered if anyone had anything to share.
Yeah, there's loads and loads of stories coming out of the Message Trust that do online conferences and online talks, and they always kind of do a call to the altar, I guess we would call it, and they've had loads of new Christians come forward, loads of young people come forward and say, do you know what, this is the path we want to go down. So yes, I've heard of stories of where it definitely has worked. I'm sure lots of you guys have as well.
Dawn, I keep hearing about lots and lots of resources, and that's a bit of a blizzard to me. I just don't. Do you think you could possibly come up with about 3 really good teenager type talks?
I can.
And send it around the whole group. I mean, the church I'm going to, if I could, there's about 4 or 5 teenagers. If I could just send them 3 really good talks,
Yep.
that would work for them.
Yeah, I can do that.
If I don't know
Richard,
whether you've got everybody's email, Dawn, because I think I send it out blind copy. So if you send it to me, I'll send it out.
Perfect.
Yeah, Richard, we've Urban Saints, with the young people, which we've helped them do, set up a new Instagram called Flip the Narrative. So we've basically filmed them answering tons of different questions. We did actually quite a big focus during the racial injustice period that we massively had. And so they were doing a lot about justice is and love is. And so being able to bring their thoughts, feelings, laments into that page. So it's tons and tons of young people's journey on growing in their faith, and also that whole serving others, like Dawn said, is it really kind of captures them in. So that's been really good.
Yeah, and just get them involved in it. So many people do online church services. So for us at the moment, my eldest son, actually all three children, have been totally involved in everything that I've done online as well, just because their skills are so much better than mine, and they're awesome as well. But just really get them involved in everything that you do. I'm sure, Richard, you've done worship with lots of young people, potentially.
You mean sort of the last few months?
Yeah.
Type thing? Well, I mean, I've sort of been involved in our church's worship and doing online recordings and things, but I mean, sadly, in the church I go to, so we before lockdown, we'd sort of restarted our children's ministry, and we were building some really great momentum with that, and we'd had, like, young children sort of giving their lives to Jesus, which was amazing. Then lockdown hit, and I mean, the children who we were connecting with, I mean, sort of from quite deprived area really, and we've struggled to connect with them online, and when we've tried to connect with the parents, which has been more successful. I mean, at our church, I suppose we're probably quite different to all of you by the sounds of it, but we've actually not gone back to our building yet. We've just been completely online since March, and so sort of forgotten a bit what church is like, to be honest. It's been that long, but yeah, so I've not had the opportunity, unfortunately, to sort of do worship with sort of like young people. I mean, there's a young girl who sort of in high school who was involved in our worship group, and been trying to obviously involve her in our worship. So I suppose that's one example, but yeah.
I'll just leave you with this little question, just thinking about that. So one of the things that I've been working on is with the Anglican Communion, looking at faith at home and how we do that a bit more successfully. And one of the recommendations that we made was, when Messy Church started 10 years ago, or however long it was, its intention was to connect with the outer fringes of church. But now Messy Church has moved and is literally church. It is church now. But now there is nothing there that connects with the outer fringes. How do we connect? I don't know. Well, I do, but I don't. I've got ideas, but it's all situational, isn't it? It's, what works in your own parish might not work elsewhere. But just think about those children and young people, especially you just reminded me of it, Richard, just then. Those children that you connected with before that are seemingly lost. How do we reconnect with those? What do we do to gather those people back in? Not necessarily to a Sunday gathering, because whatever that shape looks like, a family service, whatever it is, what do we do? How can we be innovative and creative in gathering those people? I'll just leave you with that thought. That's my thought.
Thank you, Dawn. My own sort of feelings, this church where I'm working, is that there is a lot of children, because it's that sort of church and it's a very middle class area, and in a sense we seem to be connecting with them and holding the connection pretty well, because they largely come with the parents. Most of these children seem to disappear when they get to about 11 years of age, but we've still got literally a small handful of teenagers. Now, I think they are the golden ingots, but we don't seem to be maintaining the connection with them. They're not appearing. So you've really prompted me. I need to go away and really, really, really connect with you.
Do you know what you need to do? You need to go to leading your church into youth work. Coming next year.
Right.
It is an
Okay.
amazing speaker.
Robin, one of the best things that we've seen happen is going and doing a donut drop. So going to people's houses and dropping off donuts and just having a 10-minute, 15-minute conversation, socially distanced at the door. Especially with the lads, it's gone down really well.
Right. A donut drop.
Donut drop.
If you did donut holes, you could socially distance and chuck them into their mouths.
Even better.
Okay. Well, I've got two really good things there. You and Dawn are going to come up with 3 really good online talks that I can pass on to them, and then I'll do a donut drop. Okay. Right. Well done. I think more than anything else, you've just reminded us all. We so easily in our churches forget, about children, young people, and that comment to Richard, I know it's discouraging to lose contact, but what a fantastic thing that you did in the first place, that you saw that some of these children coming to Jesus. So nothing can actually take that away from you, Richard. Well done. Right. While we're doing that, Derek was desperately producing some slides.
They're mint, they're perfect. But now we're back on, and after what you said earlier, I have got to get rid of my puppets now. So, but yeah, if you can make me host mode, that'd be amazing.
Right, over to Derek.
I'll make you host.
Thank you very much. Right, I am probably not going to say anything that is going to be completely groundbreaking and shaking for anybody, but hopefully it will get us all thinking and we can see where we get to. So just as a little heads up, Robin asked me to have a little think about what it's like on a parish level reaching out in lockdown, what it's been like for me personally in inner city Bradford, and what's been the experience of trying to do evangelism when we can't get out and about. And I thought, well, we'll start with where we start. Sorry, I'm about to get disturbed by a small boy.
You can finish first.
I can't finish.
I'm not finish what you're talking about.
I'm going to be talking for about 15 minutes.
Okay. Well, I've decided that we need a new fridge.
He now doesn't need to know. Right. So how do you get young people involved? They come and steal your iPad. There's the answer. But I started by thinking with 4 words that some of you will be very familiar with. If Robin at least doesn't recognize prayer, presence, proclamation and persuasion, then there is a problem. These are the 4 Ps that come out of Leipzig. And for me personally, actually, whenever I think about evangelism, they always come in really handy. And my biggest reflection over the last few months has been that actually this whole COVID shenanigan has, I think, been a real challenge to a church who have got very used to being able to do presence very, very well and very consistently, and often actually without having to put that much effort into it. And then all of a sudden that's got fully shaken up. And I think church have adapted pretty well, actually. And a lot of the ways we are responding, certainly in the online world, in terms of proclamation and persuasion with people who are already a little bit keyed in, that's been a fairly natural transition. And that seems to work, to my eyes, a bit more smoothly than the presence thing. I think the reality, certainly speaking of my own experience, where I love the whole just getting out in the parish, walking around, talking to people, being with people, whether that's in institutions and specific roles or whether that's just out in the streets. I love being with people. So how do we respond when actually that's not as much of an option anymore? And how do we respond to something that makes things a little bit difficult? Some of that, the church has been really good, I think, at responding creatively to. We've already heard about going sort of doorstep drops and creating opportunities for presence and doing that a bit more intentionally. We've had to do intentional because it wasn't just going to fall in our laps in the same way. But alongside all of that, we've had to engage much more than the church necessarily has done previously. Much as we've been talking about it for years, we've had to engage much more with an online presence and working out what an online presence looked like. And the reality is there, existing relationships have been able to be kept going because of online relationships. They're already there, they're keyed in, we can keep doing that. Casting the net a little bit wider though, I think has kind of highlighted some of that lack of intentionality and complacency that we as the church have sometimes got used to around presence. Because, and this is absolutely pointing the finger at me rather than anybody else, the reality is actually, I think a lot of the way we've done online as church has been basically an online version of let's open the doors and expect people to walk straight in. And that's, we moved away from that in real time. We realized that if we want people to come into church, we have to get out there in the first place to start with. And yet online, it feels like there's been a bit of a retreat. And yes, it's amazing how churches have gone to online services, better engagement with social media, better engagement with the internet, better engagement with talking to people on that. But we are faced with that same sort of challenge of we can't just expect people to just turn up, whether that's an online church or a physical church. That I think is one of the challenges that this whole COVID malarkey has exposed, and that some of that complacency around presence, which I certainly recognise in my own practice, has been really, really shown. So I want to just set us off a few little questions basically, and then hopefully it will spur some thoughts as we get going. And it basically comes out of what does it look like to use the online sphere that we're having to get more familiar with a little bit better. I am recognising 100% that doesn't solve the problem of people who don't have internet access. So I am 100% also relying on a foundation of creative physical presence still happening, like we've already been talking about. And there have been good moves towards that, and that's brilliant. But just to get us thinking, I wonder if anybody knows who this wonderful human being is. And I'm going to leave it a bit of silence just to work out. I was half expecting Rolf might recognise him, but he's far too busy at the moment. This is a film director. It's a guy called Edgar Wright. And anyone who's seen Shaun of the Dead or any of the, what's his name, Sean Thingy. Anyone who's seen any of the Simon Pegg movies has probably seen something that Edgar Wright's done. If you've seen Scott Pilgrim, you've seen something that Edgar Wright's done. Edgar Wright gets hailed as a really interesting film director because he is a comedic director that uses the whole scope of what film can do as a media to make jokes. So if he's telling a joke about a journey, you don't just hear someone telling the story about the journey. You see the journey. You see crap freeze frames, and you see sitting at traffic lights, and you see all of that. He's someone who makes full use of his whole medium to tell the story that he's trying to tell. And that really sort of got me thinking, because for me, there's sort of two bits of really intentional online engagement. One of which is about that picture of telling a story. Fundamentally, we know that the thing that engages human beings, particularly the younger generations, the thing that engages people is story, and is a convincing story that they can then feel a part of. The online world gives us a chance to tell a story really, really well, if we can get our heads around making better use of it. And one of the bits of language that I actually love that Facebook sometimes uses is, if you're on any Facebook groups, you'll sometimes see that some people are actually allocated a little title, and it says that they are visual storytellers. And for me, that's what Edgar Wright does, but for me, that's what we as the church can be doing. We as the church can be doing as we take out the gift of the story of Jesus and take it into the world. I've thrown up two big words there because I think the really exciting and interesting challenge for us as the church in this moment is that I think we've got to change our thinking on those two words, hospitality and gift particularly. And I think I say that because our use of the internet, I think, is coming out of a bit of a church mindset, which talks of us showing hospitality. And we as the church and we as Christians love to reach out with the love of God. We love to demonstrate hospitality, don't we? But at the moment, until we've got that story out there, and until we are effectively getting into the spaces outside our little online churches with that story and finding a way to put that out in pictures or songs or words or thoughts or whatever else it is that people can think of that I know nothing about, because actually I just steal ideas off everybody. I never have a creative idea in my life. Actually, until we're getting out there, enjoying the hospitality of others and sensitively giving the gift of the story of Jesus Christ and the hope that that can bring in a time even of darkest despair that we sit in ourselves at the moment, until we can be recognizing that actually part of our task that we're not quite used to is that we've got to enjoy the hospitality of others rather than being the focus of it and bringing everybody in and showing them our hospitality. I think there's a gift in there for us in receiving from others, and there's a gift in there that we can offer by a bit of a change. We've grown very used to standing in a fairly privileged position where we can welcome people in. Some of the online work, I think, in exactly the same way as we've thought about in terms of the physical church recently, some of the journey has to be us going out and enjoying the hospitality of others. And the bit of that for me, which is the hard bit, is of course thinking, where do we go? If this were a talk on the physical space, you would be saying, well, don't just sit in your church building, go out into the pubs and talk to people, or go to the parks and sit and chat to someone. But when we can't do that, where are the pubs and the parks online that we can go and spend time and that we can reach into and recognize that actually 9 times out of 10 there's a welcome waiting for us, and that there's a gift in accepting that hospitality. If we can let go of this insecurity that keeps us in our little space of, here's our online space, please come into it. Please don't hear me pointing a finger at other people saying that I don't recognize this is our experience as St. Oswald's and All Saints as well. This is a start of a conversation. but for me, the two sort of really significant questions that have come out of this is actually in this season of challenge where everything is uncertain and we're having to think differently about things and we're having to let go of some of our old ways of doing things. What does it mean to preserve our intentionality in where we go? What does it mean when I walk the dog and I do get my 20 minutes outside where I might see some real human beings? What does it mean to make that an intentional journey of walking with Jesus? But also, what does it mean to sit on Facebook and join a different Facebook group with other people that do this, that, or the other, or get on a local WhatsApp interest group and intentionally be there, looking for the opportunities to share the love of Jesus and the story that people can get into? And how do I deal with the fact that actually doing that means I've got to relinquish some of my control? Because actually, I think a lot of the church presence online has still come from a bit of a position of we need to create our thing that people can come to. And while that might tell the story, it doesn't always find a way to draw people into the story. I love that we've been able to do online services as our two churches. And I love that throughout opening the buildings, as well as throughout full lockdown, we've been able to keep the online presence going, and that service goes on every single week for people who can't join in. But I also know that that is a model of us telling, and the conversation doesn't necessarily begin or doesn't necessarily get followed up with someone who might just see it on their Facebook feed and click through. So what does it mean to let go enough of some of our sort of proud ways of doing things and step into the other spheres of online life that are already going on? That for me is the harder question at the moment. I certainly don't come into this as an expert. I'm certainly not going to say I'm doing a better job than anybody else, because people in this meeting will be doing this infinitely better than I do. But I think there's just something in there that Corona is, I think, really challenging us as the church to step into a world where we're perhaps no longer the Western majority, and we can't rest on that picture anymore. But at the same time, I think that makes it super, super exciting, because the early church weren't a minority, were they? Pete started us off talking about underground church, and actually underground movements have never happened in places where it's majority, have they? So what does an underground online church movement look like, of people stepping into online spaces and spreading the love of Jesus? It looks like people who are a bit vulnerable and a bit out of control. And that's scary for us all, I guess. Certainly scary for me. But those are the questions that I keep coming back to, actually. What do I need to let go of in order to more faithfully speak of Jesus? So I'm going to leave those on there. I'll add 2 extra words, and then, yeah, let's talk. You're muted, Rob.
And that was a great presentation, and you've left us, wow, but how do we do it? I've got various questions, but I always dash in, but I'm sure other people have got things that they would like to say or ask about. How do we make contact? How do we build relationships? How do we get into other people's little groups and one thing and another? How do we do it?
I think one way is starting with your interests online, I guess, and joining groups or forums that include our hobbies or interests, because that's a common link with people, and it creates a natural way of engaging with people, whether that's practical interest or an intellectual or artistic thing. Yeah.
Bruce, you are a writer, poet and prose, and that's got you into other groups in Bradford of writers.
Yes, and that's right. And I was part of them, yeah, before lockdown, and because I've not been so active, to be honest, thus far in engaging with the groups. Well, some of them online, but there's a book club I'm part of, a Zoom book club. But yeah, I mean, I was thinking of yeah, so that is, yeah, and there is local poetry stuff happening online as well. But yeah, I mean, at another extreme end, I was thinking about, like, Richard Dawkins has his own website, for example, and it has. I haven't engaged there yet, but they have discussion forums, and I know some Christians engage with that kind of thing. So, you know, yeah, engaging with new atheism and stuff like that. But that's a particular thing. But yeah, I mean, you know, because I was thinking before lockdown, church I was part of in Scotland, I know that they started discipleship groups which focused on particular interests, like a walking group or a photography group, as just a very natural way to engage with people because you've got that common interest. So I think it's quite a good principle.
Thanks, Bruce. I think you're right. Walking groups are a terrific way of attracting and making contact with people. Jane.
Can I ask a question? I was just wondering, I'm sure most other people here, their church will be in a place that has its own Facebook group. So, you know, we have Green Gates Matters down at Green Gates, and there's an Idle Folk page. And whether anybody, not just on a personal level, but as a church, engages on those sites, kind of thinking about, you know, there's always people complaining on most of these sites, and whether anybody would comment as the church. I mean, I find it difficult, even if I post a link to one of our services, there's always somebody then comes back with something controversial on there, kind of thing, and I recoil back behind my keyboard, kind of thing. But just if anybody actually does do any of that, if anybody's brave enough. I take that as a no.
No. I'm not quite Dawn.
Yeah, of a really beautiful post that I saw today. So obviously toddler groups are having to close at the moment. So this church in it particularly had a church site and also a toddler group kind of Facebook site. So the two would never meet because we don't want to talk about Jesus in toddler groups. Anyway, they posted, you know, we're really, really beautiful message. We're really, really sorry, blah, blah, blah. However, we are part of the church. Here's the church link for you to have a look at. You're welcome to come to any of our online services, and just to let you know, we pray for you all the time as well. And I was like, that's so beautiful. And it's almost kind of like an easier way to do it, so people don't feel offended or whatever. But just to know that someone is praying for them I just thought it was really beautiful. I just wanted to share that. That's cool.
That's good.
I don't know if this is quite what you were asking about, Jane, but you know, Carvely is your classic place for, you know, the Carvely local community Facebook, and everybody's very involved. And they've just done this huge thing. They had 120 houses decorated for Halloween to celebrate it in the village. And so the next thing is Advent. So I made contact with the person that runs all this, because they're planning on having Advent calendars in people's windows. And I said, could we work together? I've heard about this. And she was really pleased that the church wanted to be part of this project. You know, really, I mean, Derek was talking about other people's hospitality. And I thought, oh, she might say, keep your church nose out of it. But she was so hospitable. We would love to have you involved.
That's great. I think down at Green Gates, we definitely find that people have a very a very real sense of ownership over church. So they're very interested in the building of church and feel this sense of ownership over that, and anything that happens there, you know, they are interested in, but don't talk to them about God. They're not interested in that.
Well, they will, yeah, you often get that impression, but you'd be surprised. There would be other people who would be drawn in through the churchiness of it, and they would be interested in God. In every bunch of people, there is always at least one searcher. I'm convinced it's a spiritual principle. We've suddenly found, because the thing we never talk about in these things, we talk about church, is our families. And Mo and I, we have quite a large family. Well, it's all my family. I mean, Maureen has her own family, but we won't go there. Literally, we will not go there. And the point is, to one or two of my, two of my nieces, I've been sending these little Jesus notes, and I don't think they're reading them. But then another niece suddenly hears about these and says, will you send them to me? And she read the first lot, and we got an email back saying, can you send me the next lot? And we just had a third email back saying, can you send me the next lot? So often in the most surprising places, there are people hidden away, you know.
Yeah, because we didn't think about sending them to her because we didn't think she'd be interested, did we?
That's right.
So
That's
we
right.
sent them to the others because we thought they would, and they haven't been bothered, and then she's asked for it. Brilliant.
I thought I'd just said that, actually.
Well, yeah.
Richard.
Yeah, no, I just I liked what Derek said about sort of that we can get trapped almost in talking about online, taking church that was before and putting it online. And this is sort of something we realized in our church, that we're doing these broadcasts and they're going out on Facebook, on YouTube, to the world, really, potentially. And just some of the language we were using, and it was almost as if we were like in our little church still, and we were just like, so, the way we were talking, it wasn't sort of outward, it was sort of quite inward, like we were talking to our own. And I have heard clergy, you know, in the diocese saying, oh, well, we're just doing this online and it's just for our congregation members, that, you know, it's just at the moment, we just want to help them, you know, it's going for a difficult time. And I think we're just missing a huge opportunity online to reach out. I mean, and so a decision we decided as our church to try and do that was at the end of each of our services, or sort of at the start as well, we created a new email that was like inquiries@smallthornton.org, which is our church email. And we got the people leading or hosting just to say, you know, if you've got any questions about faith or about our church, you know, you can contact us. And we actually got a woman who we've only had one so far, but we've had one woman who's got in touch with us and wants to connect with us. And so that just a small shift like that had an impact. So, yeah.
Isn't that fantastic? Derek, back to you.
Can I just chip back in on that one? I think, Rich, that's absolutely one of the absolute joys of stuff like Facebook live stream and YouTube has, for me, been picking up on the comments throughout it as well. I would be absolutely astonished if we were the only church that has had people watching online that we don't know and have never met and probably never will meet in person. But actually, you can still follow them up. If you got someone brand new turned up at your church, I know you for a fact, Robin, would be around their house banging on the door to see how they were. And the joy of seeing that someone has watched your service and sending them a message to say, hi, how are you doing? How did you get on with it? Has been a really special thing. But the one thing that really chimed in with what you were just saying though there, Rich, and this is the one reason why actually, if I'm honest, I'm a little bit happy that we're going back into deeper lockdown again, is that we're a very small church, our two churches, and not particularly technically able. But when we were in deepest lockdown, we were doing pre-recorded services, which were 30 minutes at maximum, and they were visually varied and different and interesting. And while they were out, there was somebody sitting, monitoring the comments and responding to absolutely everything as it was going along.
Wow.
When we've been back into church, because we are not in a position to get somebody lining up OBS and running everything alongside it, we've had single focus point, online, plain and simple live stream. And my honest response to what Dawn was saying earlier on is, if I was a young person in the deepest of lockdown at the start, I would have been all right with church. Once we got back into the building, what we were then able to keep putting online in terms of quality, for want of a better word, went downhill drastically. And it was like we were doing 80% worth of quality in person and 80% worth of quality online, as opposed to doing 100% either way. And I know if I was a young person watching our current live streams, I'd be like, whatever. And I suspect if I was new to church watching our current live streams, I might feel similarly about it as well. So that I think there is a real challenge in thinking that we can do what we do online, sometimes a bit more creatively than what we might do in some church contexts in person. Because people aren't expecting something in particular to start with. They've not come in with, this is what we want on a Sunday morning. So whatever they get online is all right, isn't it?
Right, we'll take two last quick comments. We need to get Dawn and then Neil.
Just to follow on with that, I think that's sometimes why we're losing young people and children and families, because what they see online is totally different to what is actually presented. What they love the fact that they can do it in their pajamas. Not saying that going to church in your pajamas is cool, but but it fits with their family model so much better than physical church. And I think the question to the church is, how do we reimagine what church could be so that we could include those people on the outer fringes? That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Dawn. Neil, who has been unbelievably silent all night, is sitting there like a little Buddhist monk, and I think, is that a dummy? Has he nipped out for a cup of tea or something? You're now going to say something, Neil.
I've been listening very carefully. There's been some great stuff tonight. But I agree about being creative online. I think it's really important. After saying that, one of our great successes is our formal morning prayer, where people have just dropped on, and we get 20 people regularly for the whole morning prayer. And some of those are definitely non-Christian or non-church goers, shall we say.
Wow, that I have heard that so many times. Thank you, Neil. Rolf, also been very silent all night. Rolf, you all right, brother? It's lovely.
Yeah, all right, all right.
Good.
Just keeping my powder dry.
He looks fit to burst.
So I want to offer, if I may, just a couple of reflections, particularly just something Dawn just said. We've actually found that our families struggle to engage with online full stop. And I've been looking at some research that's come out of Barna in America. Because we've been looking at the demographics on our Facebook, certainly over the last 3 months, there was a period in the early lockdown where it was mostly females, sort of 25 to 36. So a lot of our families were trying to come online. But I had a young mum.
Could I just run this? So what you're saying is you were online and you were finding that it were mainly females, 18 to 26, that were coming on to watch you.
Yeah, mate.
Well, that's not a surprise. That is not a surprise.
No, there's the general. However, there's a follow-up to this. One of our young mums made the observation that she really struggled with online because as a mum at home, she is not proud of who she is, because at home you parent in a very different way to how you do when you're out and about. So the mum she is when she comes to physical church, and the way her children behave when they come to physical church, is much easier to kind of, well, and I know we always like to think that people aren't being hypocrites and we're not having a veneer or being artificial, but it was a really valuable insight for me, because she seemed to be saying, I'm not proud to watch church when I feel like I'm struggling to keep my kids under control. And especially, I mean, in her case, I mean, one of her children has some learning needs, but the research is bearing it out that young people, and particularly people with young families, so our demographics have just, it's all old white ladies now for St. Luke's. So we've struggled to go back to real church, because Alistair at St. Luke's in Holbeck, where I am, has been obsessed about making sure that when we went back live, there was always going to be children's provision. And it's been quite hard to make that work, because of course our volunteers are quite anxious. I'd also say, and this is just in reflecting back to Derek, and I feel for him, I really do. I'm quite pleased that we never sought to change what we were doing online when we reintroduced in-church services. In fact, we knew that because of the size of St. Luke's, we had to create a completely different, for this season only, style of worship. It's been hard for me to adapt to just playing and singing and not other people joining in. And I've mentioned on other forums about needing to find different models within church history that work. So I'm really gutted for you, mate, that there was a decision to kind of put their best energy back into in-church and sacrifice some of the online content. And I'm encouraged to think that actually maybe we're as drained as we are, because we have been going, right, let's make the in-church different and good, but let's keep making the output that we're doing online the same.
Thanks, Rolf. Those are two good. Right. Can I just share one experience? I have a particular friend who I always looked at as like a great model of how he just gets everything really well. And every church he's worked in has grown. All he does for his online, he just makes a little 3 or 4 minute video on his wife stands there with the phone. He sits in his armchair and gives about a really good, dynamic, relevant, which connects little gospel talk every week. That's it. And people are loving it and responding to it. Anyway, I do want to say a big thank you to Dawn and to Derek, who've shared so much stuff and put a lot of work into the presentation. And you've just, given us lots of stuff. Derek, I did ask Dawn if she could just bung 3 things out on the WhatsApp or whatever. And perhaps you could just, give us a couple of your questions just to send round. Either Mo can send them round, or we can send them round on the so that we keep the thinking growing. Now then, I'm just pulling things together finally, folks. And just 2 things. First of all, Richard and I are doing another webinar next Thursday, and it's been done by a couple of the Leipzig team. It's called Making Christmas Work, 7 Tips. And because obviously Christmas is going to be really different from everybody this year. It's just 7 very practical things. This is how you can make Christmas work in lockdown or lockdown 2 or whatever. And if any of you would like to come in on that, I think it's 10:30 next Thursday morning, and they just need to book a place, don't they, Richard? How do they book a place?
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, on the WhatsApp group, I can share the email address that you just need to send.
Right. Great idea.
Will you be recording that, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, we've not chatted about that, have we, everyone? But I know we recorded the last one, didn't we? So I'm guessing we will record this one, won't we? But
Richard, it's 10:30 in the morning. Maureen can get up and watch it live. This is getting out of hand.
Thinking of people that are working then, dear.
Okay. Claire, you're being attacked by a wild animal.
Yeah, I apologise.
Anyway, do tune in to that webinar, and hopefully out of the 7 tips, there'll be one, maybe even two things that absolutely hit you on the nose and say, this will work for us. One other thing I wanted to mention was that about 3 years ago, a great friend of mine who's a brilliant pioneer priest, he brought out a book calling Becoming Reverend, and it was all about how God called him to be a vicar and his time at theological college and one thing and another. It's called Matt Woodcock. I brought him over to do an evening here in Bradford, and lots of people bought his book and absolutely loved it because it's lovely and light and frothy. And anyway, you might be interested, some of you, to know that he's brought out another book. It is now called, he's done Becoming Reverend, and his new book is called Being Reverend. And he's already working on the third part of the trilogy, Why the Bishop Sacked Me from Being a Reverend. That will be really good. But anyway, Being Reverend, it is now out. You can get it Amazon or Waterstones, one thing or another. Just recommend that. And at some stage, I'm hoping to get him over to Bradford again, and maybe we could all have a live get together. We keep talking about, you know, where we are, we're in the lockdown, and we could. I just been reading through the Old Testament prophets, and they had a different type of lockdown called exile, where they were literally shipped out of Jerusalem into the Babylonian, and then it became the Persian Empire, and they just felt that we're going to lose it all. And it was during that exile that a lot of them did fall away and lost it, but many others in the time there found a new depth. They just had to put down their roots deeper than ever before. Before, for many of them, faith was just every now and again we have a big trip to the temple. That couldn't work anymore. And they just found a whole new spiritual depth of living and of being God's people, which they then brought back with them out of lockdown or out of exile. And there are lots of really great verses. This is just one of them out of a late psalm where it says, the Lord builds up Jerusalem. He gathers the outcasts of Israel. And although I'm trying to do as good a job as I can during lockdown, frankly, I'm finding it jolly difficult. And to some extent, my mentality is just, can we just hang on, Lord? And then when it all lifts, I believe that there is going to be a new beginning for us all. God will build up Jerusalem, and he will gather the outcasts to us once again. So thanks for tonight, folks. It's been a great night, and thanks especially Derek and Dawn, but everybody that's joined in. And we will meet again, I think, in the new year. We normally do about once every 2 months, so that will be like early, mid-January. It's impossible to find out what night works for everybody. We'll just have to stick a pin in it, find a night, and we'll keep you all well informed. Is that okay for everybody? Do come along to next Thursday if you're able to. But as we finish, Pete, you've been very silent tonight. Could you just close in prayer for us, brother?
Of course I can. Yes, Father God, thank you that we can gather together and hear amazing stories of the work that you are doing. We just pray that as we go from this place, that you would equip us and prepare us for the journey ahead, and give us eyes that may see those who are lost and don't yet know you. May we have divine encounters this very week for the glory of your name and for the sake of the lost. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Pete. What a lovely phrase you used there, my brother, that we might have divine encounters. I try to pray every morning for one encounter during that day. Thanks, everybody. God bless you all. See you soon. Okay. Is that okay? Is it a bit long?